The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at choi.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. The federal government is one step closer to putting a temporary pause on GST after a vote in the House of Commons Thursday night. Legislation to exempt a number of items from GST between December 14th and February 15th passed a vote in Ottawa with support from the Liberals and NDP. Among items included in the proposed exemption are children's clothing, a number of food items, and toys and video game consoles. People in BC will not need to pay the 5% federal GST on qualifying items during the 2-month period. Later on in the program, we'll hear from Nanaimo-Ladysmith MP Lisa Marie Barron about why she supported the measure. But first, VIU Professor of Political Studies Michael MacKenzie wasn't pulling any punches. He called the policy bad in every way when I spoke with him Thursday.
Overall, this is irresponsible policy making. It's very clearly designed to get attention, to make people, happy that the Liberals are giving them a little bit of money, and to, give people a break over the holiday, as Trudeau has been saying. But if the purpose was to help people who need money the most in a high inflation environment, the Liberals could have increased the size of the GST rebate, right? The GST rebate is a policy which gives the lowest income earners some money back, because the GST applies to everybody, and as a percentage of income that hits the lowest income earners the most. So to make it a little fair, we give people a GST rebate. That's been in place the whole time the GST has been in place. And by my estimates, they could have increased the GST rebate by about 50%, and it would have cost a little bit less than this brief tax holiday and the $250 checks. So they could have done that increase temporarily for 1 year, and it would have cost less than this. But that wouldn't have helped the Liberals attract all of the voters that they think they need to win the next election. So they used a larger, or they plan to give the money to a larger group of people. So I think this is really not good policy making, because people making $150,000 a year don't need this $250. And it's going to cost the public a lot of money.
The Liberals have now separated those two things, the pause on the GST from the $250 checks. What is your take on the GST holiday itself?
Sure. So this looks like it might pass the House today, even. And, the problem with this is that the GST is an important revenue source for Canadians, and Canadians need the government to do a lot of different things and to provide them with many different goods and services. And the GST is one of the ways in which we generate money for the government. And nobody likes the GST. It was deeply unpopular when Brian Mulroney's government introduced it in the early 1990s. Nobody has ever liked it, but every government has come to realize that it's a very important source of revenue. And my concern with this policy is that it's effectively repoliticizing the GST. People had got used to paying it. Most people can afford to pay it. Those who can't afford to pay it get the rebate. I would be in favor of increasing the rebate if that were needed. But most people can afford to pay this tax, and it is deeply irresponsible to repoliticize it. And by that I mean make it a political issue again. And it means that in the future, governments might have an incentive to either cut it further or to get rid of it entirely, which will undermine the government's ability to keep balanced budgets and provide Canadians with the services they need. And if you think about it, the amount of money saved that you might save over this tax holiday will be relatively small, but the amount of money collectively collected by the GST over 2 months is huge. So you can't do much with the money you're saving, but the government can do a lot with the money it's collecting.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland talked the other day about a vibe session, the idea that by several metrics, it looks like the Canadian economy is going to do well in the future, but there seems to be a disconnect between that idea and what people are saying, are feeling, are seeing at the cash register when they go to the grocery store. And the idea of this, as it's being presented, is to give people a break or to maybe stimulate some spending over the holiday period. Do you buy any of that?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to stimulate a lot of spending. I mean, you know, if you're buying a big ticket item, saving the GST would make a difference, but they're not giving you a holiday on big ticket items. It's all, you know, food stuff and services. And so I don't think that people are really making a decision about whether or not to buy beer and wine over the holiday based on whether there's GST on it. I don't think that's a credible argument.
More generally, do you think this idea of all of these economic projections say things are going well, numbers are going up, the GDP is going up, and people's lived reality of being able to afford their basic needs, do you think there's a disconnect there?
Well, in some ways, I mean, inflation has hit us hard. We've managed since the pandemic to bring it under control, but reducing inflation doesn't mean that prices are going down, right? When prices go down, we call it deflation. Reducing inflation just means that they're going up at a slower rate. So you don't really see that. And groceries have been going up dramatically. I mean, it's really problematic for people, and it can't be sustained. I think the worst of the inflation has probably been brought under control, but it's still hitting people hard because you go to the grocery store every week, right? And you're paying a lot more money than you used to. So I understand why people are feeling like the economy is not going well. And, so I do think there is a bit of a disconnect, but it's not grounded, or it is grounded rather in reality. I mean, people see this reality all of the time. But a GST tax holiday isn't going to solve the problem.
Do you think this is something that there's any chance it would be happening if this weren't sort of the last holiday season period before an election?
No, it wouldn't be happening otherwise. I mean, the reason it's happening is because the Liberals are down in the polls and they're flailing. I mean, this is flailing. This is government policy designed to try and do something while they're worried about losing the next election. And it's not going to work. That's the other thing, is that it's a giveaway to Canadians. It's not going to make a huge difference to most individuals. It's going to cost the government a huge amount of money, and it's not even going to work to get the Liberals elected. It's bad in every way.
So if Chrystia Freeland were sitting here, or Justin Trudeau were sitting here in the studio, what kind of questions would you want to ask them about this policy?
I don't know if I'd have questions. I'd have advice. One piece of advice would be, don't do this. I mean, it's irresponsible, and we need leaders who stand up and treat people like adults. If we want our governments to provide services like healthcare, I don't have a family doctor. My family doesn't have a family doctor. I desperately want one. I need one. I deserve one like everybody else. We need our governments to have revenues to provide services to people. And it's deeply irresponsible to do this kind of thing. And I'm not just worried about the money that they're spending for this tax holiday. I'm worried that this, as I said before, will repoliticize the GST and make it less viable in the future, which will undermine the government's capacity to do things for Canadians, and then it'll undermine Canadians' trust in government further when they don't get the services that they need and deserve. So I mean, I don't have any questions for them. I only have advice.
Do you think that this is a problem or indicative of a problem that is larger than any one party or any one 2-month tax holiday? And if so, what do you think could be done about it?
Yeah, I do think that it's a larger problem. I think it's a larger problem of leadership. We really need leaders, as I said a moment ago, to treat people like adults. We know that governments need revenue. There are different sources of revenue, but all of us have to contribute. We know that. Everybody knows that. And I think people, when they're treated like adults, will be reasonable about it. If they really can't afford it, we try and figure something out. But people who can afford to contribute to the government should be contributing to the government. And we know that that's how finances work. That's how finances work in business. It's how our personal finances work. It's how government finances work. And we need leaders who stand up and convey that to people so that we don't make mistakes that impose, for example, borrowing on future generations. It's totally irresponsible. And it's a larger problem because we see very few leaders who are willing to do that. And very few leaders, by the way, who stand up and take positions on issues that they're willing to lose on. You know, when you are willing to lose on something, it means you're committed to it. And people respond positively to that kind of commitment.
Do they respond positively enough that leaders won't just lose?
Well, sometimes you will, right? Mulroney lost badly. He resigned before he lost the election, but his party suffered the worst election loss in Canadian history. They went down to 2 seats. They were in government, and they went down to 2 seats after introducing the GST. It wasn't just the GST that was an issue, but it was one of the main issues. He was willing to lose on it. And what it did is set up the next government, the Liberals, to balance the budget. And balancing the budget was good for Canada. He was willing to lose on that because he knew it was good for Canada. This is not what Justin Trudeau is doing. I can't think of a single issue that Trudeau is willing to stand up and lose on. He's going to lose, but he doesn't have any principled issues he's standing up to defend.
Now, between when this came out as an idea and now, Canada has also seen the threat of significant major tariffs imposed by the U.S. Do you think that there's any intersection between those two areas of fiscal policy impact? Yeah,
so I don't think that there's any connection to this so-called GST holiday, but I do think that this is related to Canadians generally not feeling super good about the economy, while currently a lot of the economic indicators are looking pretty good. We've got inflation down, there's some growth, unemployment is not too bad. You know, as Freeland said, that, you know, the indicators look good. Well, it's pretty hard to know what's going on when you have a very unpredictable administration coming in to the presidency in the United States. And we have Trump tweeting this week about 25% tariffs. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that's bluster in advance of negotiation, and it's bullying. But if any kind of tariffs happen, the Canadian economy won't be doing so well. So I think Canadians looking at their food prices and thinking about what might happen or how much unpredictability there is in the United States right now are very reasonably not super positive and optimistic about the economy going forward.
Here in Nanaimo, our MP Lisa Marie Barron is a member of the NDP. How would you analyze that party's place in all of this situation with the proposed GST pause and with the $250 checks? What do you make of it? What questions would you have for her and her party?
Yeah, I mean, I think the NDP are acting irresponsibly as well. And, I think that they're right about one thing, which is that if the government's going to give checks to people, this should include not just people who are working, but others such as students and retirees and others who are making less than $150,000 but who aren't working. I mean, if you're going to give those checks, which I think is a bad idea, if you're going to do it, you should give it to everybody who's making less than $150,000. They're right about that, but the NDP is being just as irresponsible as the Liberals, and I personally don't understand it. I mean, what we need is fiscal responsibility across the political spectrum. We need all of the parties to recognize that you shouldn't spend more than you're bringing in, or if you are spending more than you're bringing in, it should be investment in the future. This is not an investment in the future. The NDP should be the party that is convincingly persuading Canadians that we do have to contribute so that we can provide the services that we need and want from government. They're not doing that. To be honest, it's pathetic. They're doing a terrible job.
If you go back to an idea that you mentioned earlier on of the GST at around 5% is something that, like most people, it's not impacting their ability to live their life, or it's not the deciding factor on whether or not they make a purchase. How do you think we should arrive at what level that is at beyond just that's what it's at now?
Well, I think that's the public discussion we should have. I mean, we should have that as a community, as a country. We should have that discussion. Our representatives should have a serious discussion about that. They have the power to set those rates. And I think it has proved to be a tax that provides very important revenue for the government. Canadians are broadly used to paying it. We've begrudgingly accepted it, but that's a good thing. And if it's hitting low-income earners harder or too hard, then we have policy mechanisms to help mitigate that. And we could increase the cost of or the size of the GST rebate. We could do that. We could afford to do that. We could increase the GST and also increase the rebate. This would be good policy making. This tax holiday is not.
When is the last time that you heard a politician talking about increasing a tax in a public way, in a, maybe you described earlier, like a treating people like adults way, and it didn't seem to come back and blow up in their face?
Well, I was going to say Mulrooney. That was the last time I heard somebody do that. It did come back and blow up in his face, in a sense. He lost his job and the party lost the election. But, it improved the future of the country. So sometimes politicians have to stand up and do that kind of thing. And, I think it's still possible that you can persuade people to contribute to the society that we're trying to build and live in together. I don't think that's inherently implausible, that you could, that argument is inherently implausible. People are deeply skeptical of government because it keeps failing to do the things it needs to do. But when governments are recognized as being just part of society, that it's, governments are us trying to live together, and persuading people to contribute is not entirely is not always going to be a failing strategy.
So is it fair to take away that you've maybe proposed a thesis that governments are often making tax cuts in a sort of way to earn votes, and those cuts sort of erode their ability to deliver on the other promises they're making in a cycle that is destroying people's faith in government's ability to do anything?
Precisely. Yeah, that's happening. And, people are rightly upset that what government needs to be doing it's not often not doing. I mean, it's very clear we have problems with providing, the most vulnerable with housing. We our healthcare system, which we're all justly proud of, is now failing. Political scientists call this output legitimacy. When a government has legitimacy, when it does things, it puts out policies that make people's lives better. And you can't sustain yourself very long if you don't have output legitimacy. And also, it's totally reasonable to not want to contribute tax money to a government that's not doing the things you need it to do. But you flip that around, it's totally reasonable to contribute money to a government that is doing things that you need it to do. So I don't think people are inherently unwilling to contribute to the public purse.
So how do we get to a place, you mentioned it starts with better leadership from the people who are in positions of power. Beyond those 3 or 4 people in the country or in the province, how do we do that? How do we get there? How do we help those people be willing to do that then?
Well, I agree. I think they're leaders. They have to lead. They have to take the initiative. But we also need, I think, a more robust and informed public discussion about government, the way that democracy works, what we want our governments to do, what the challenges governments face are. It's very difficult to govern, and we in Canada have actually been doing a very good job of governing right across the country in every province. But it's a real challenge, and I think we need to have a realistic discussion in the public realm on radio programs like this one, on television programs, online and newspapers, elsewhere, and public talks. I mean, I just don't think that we're having the kind of public discussion that we need in order to sustain the kind of leadership that we need for responsible policy making. And that's how do we do that? I mean, you chip away at it, right? Like you're doing your part here. And we try and do our part at the universities, but it's a tough thing. But if we're going to live in society together, we need to contribute. And if we're going to live in a democracy, we have to have opportunities to have these discussions. The bit of optimism I have is I think people are hungry for that and capable of it. Everybody I talk to about these sorts of issues is, when I'm talking to them person to person, they're reasonable, they're thoughtful, they have concerns. Sometimes they're angry about things, but often that anger is justified. We have a thoughtful population. I think that there's real opportunities for good leadership here, and we don't have it.
Well, Michael MacKenzie, thank you so much for coming down to discuss it.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Michael MacKenzie is the Jarislowsky Chair in Trust and Political Leadership at Vancouver Island University. He was speaking with me about the impending holiday GST pause. Thursday, I was also able to speak with Nanaimo-Ladysmith MP Lisa Marie Barron, whose NDP party voted in favor of the measure. What is your stance on this proposed pause on the GST?
Yeah, well, I guess first and foremost, Joe, living in Nanaimo and in my riding of Nanaimo-Ladysmith, we're both seeing firsthand and hearing from people firsthand around the impacts of the cost of living just being so unaffordable, people unable to keep groceries in their fridge, unable to keep a roof over their head. It's some really hard times for people. And so, the NDP has been pushing for measures to increase affordability for Canadians. This is something that's at the core of the work that we do at all times. But in particular, I'm sure you must have seen the NDP and the leader, Jagmeet Singh, pushing to see GST removed off all essentials. So not just specific items, but to see GST removed permanently off home heating, off cell phones and internet and groceries, the things that people need to make ends meet in order to give them a break. So as a result of this pressure that we've been applying, the Liberals, for lack of a better word, caved to the pressure. And now we're seeing the result of Canadians gaining a little bit of relief at a time when they need it most.
What would you say to the assertion of critics that this is irresponsible policymaking in the sense that it's repoliticizing the GST, which could be seen as like a stable source of revenue for the government, for what is going to be for Canadians savings for a couple of months that maybe amount to a couple of $100s?
Yeah, so I think what's irresponsible is not doing what needs to be done to give Canadians a break. And listen, I agree that this needs to be permanent. This is something that we're continuing to push for, to see that GST is being removed permanently on essential items, not just temporarily. But that temporary relief can make a difference for Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet. And I think it's irresponsible for us not to be doing what we can. We're elected to represent constituents across Canada. We know that people are struggling to make ends meet. We know we need to see, more than just a GST being removed. We need to see affordable housing. We need to see livable wages. But this is something that is something that the government can do that can provide some timely relief, and I certainly am in support of that.
When it comes to something like affordable housing or more generally government services, someone mentioned to me today, they don't have, for example, a family doctor, and I know there's jurisdictional issues, but when it comes to the idea that maybe people feel like the government is already not necessarily delivering on the services they might expect it to provide, do you feel like this idea of losing out on the GST revenue for a couple of months could further erode government's ability to provide people with the services they expect, which could erode people's trust in government in the first place?
No. My answer to that, Joe, is that, the government is elected to represent Canadians across the country. The government is there to provide support for people, programs for people, to make sure that we're able to live as Canadians the best lives that we can in this country that we love. And I absolutely agree that the essential services required for Canadians are not good enough right now, in particular our healthcare. I cannot agree more that we need to see a larger investment in healthcare by the federal government. We know that in Harper's time we saw cuts to the what's called healthcare transfers from the federal government to provinces, and we've seen the Liberals maintain those numbers. They increased them just slightly by a couple of percentage points, and the result is that we have provinces that have not enough money to be able to provide the health care that we need. This has been going on for generations now. This didn't happen overnight, where we haven't seen the appropriate investment being made into health care. And there is steps that the federal government can take with a strategy to ensure that we have people who are immigrating to our country, who are coming to our country with strong educational backgrounds and experience in healthcare, to make sure that they are doing the work that they're trained to be able to do. And so there's lots that the federal government can be doing better to ensure that Canadians have access to the supports and programs that they need and we rely on. And a GST break is a measure that can help Canadians at this point who are struggling to make ends meet. But the two can happen.
I also wanted to take a chance to ask about maybe the second piece of this that is less likely as it looks from now to come into play in the immediate future. This week, the idea of the $250 checks sent out to Canadians, and just offer you a chance to share your party's position on that issue. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up, Joe. So there's a reason why we fought to have this bill separated into two, because the GST is something that, in my mind, in what world would we not support Canadians getting access to a break on the GST? And so for us, that is something that we will 100% be supporting. Now, the $250 check, I know firsthand, Joe, how hard it is raising two children as a single parent, living paycheck to paycheck. $250 can make a big difference in people's lives. And unfortunately, we saw the Liberals deliver this out, or not deliver it out, but basically propose this to be delivered in such a way that it left so many people out. It left seniors out. It left juniors, many students who are not working out. It left people living with disabilities. Again, there's just so many people that were left out of these checks that were being proposed. And it is just a slap in the face for so many who are on fixed incomes, people living with disabilities who are already legislated into poverty. It's not good enough for us to be excluding those who, quite frankly, need it most. And so we're going to keep on pushing to see the Liberals expanding the check being made available to more people. And that's the bare minimum that they can do.
And then maybe lastly, what would you say more broadly to the criticism of both of these measures, that they're things that people might see as happening in the year leading up to an election? They might see them as a way to sort of get voters in voters' good books, and they wouldn't be happening in any other year in a 4-year cycle.
Yeah, as an opposition party, I'm going to always continue to push, regardless of where we are in an election cycle, to see the best interest of Canadians at the forefront, to see Canadians getting the breaks that they need at a time when so many are struggling to make ends meet. As an opposition party in the NDP, I'll keep pushing to see Canadians accessing the services and supports that they need. I'm not quite sure, what the Liberals' intentions are behind that. I know that they are most definitely floundering, is for a lack of a better word, but. As the NDP, I'll support measures that help people, and then that's the bar that's set for me there. It helps people, I'll support it.
Lisa Marie Barron, thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Nanaimo-Ladysmith MP Lisa Marie Barron speaking with me about the holiday GST pause that passed a vote in the House of Commons Thursday. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.